This is every member of the worst generation ranked by a man on the internet. So let's go. And green means go, so we're starting with Zoro. A man best described as stoic, occasionally sober, and worryingly keen to cut things. Which should worry you because you are also a thing. But Zoro is a ridiculously strong start to this list. He's one of 3 worst generation members confirmed to possess Conqueror's Haki, and one of 5 to have a bounty of over 1 billion berries. 1,111,000,000 to be precise, which is a reference to Zoro's birthday on November 11th, 1111. A reference which began all the way back on the cover of chapter 77, where a rooster is reading a newspaper depicting Zoro's bounty as 1,000,001 berry. However, because this takes place in the alternate Rooster universe, it is considered non-canon. To be honest though, the only thing that holds Zoro back from being the best of the worst is his subservience to a man who is even worse than him. Although that hasn't stopped Zoro from trying to usurp his captain's position, as shown in chapter 698, where Zoro is mistakenly drawn with Luffy's now trademark chest scar. I mean, the artists say mistakenly, but I say that Zoro was simply trying to assert dominance, much like a mandrill on a spooky island with a buxom ghost girl. And quite frankly, if you are not Luffy, Law, or Blackbeard, and maybe Kid, then Zoro is your god. I say maybe Kid because there was that one time where Kid smashed Apu into the floor, but that just wasn't going to cut it. But Zoro was. And he did go on to cut Apu very, very efficiently and satisfyingly. So we're going to open up with an immediate A tier for Zoro. Next to be furiously ranked off is Capone Gang Beige, a man who has 3 main concerns in life, being dressing sharply, providing for his family, and providing life-ending death to anyone who isn't his family. On one specific occasion, that was a rather large, rotund mother. He also has easily one of, if not the coolest Jolly Roger in the entire series, as well as a bounty of over 350 million berries post-time skip, which could buy you approximately 700,000 servings of Hachan's rather cannibalistic, when you think about it, takoyaki. What Capone lacks is simply raw power. He can't punch fight as hard as most of the others, but he more than makes up for that with planning and scheming and all sorts of other general devious intelligence. For example, he knew just how powerful Big Mom was when he tried to assassinate her, and he also knew exactly how powerful he was, which was not very, but he came up with a solid plan to take Big Mom's head regardless, which is why I respect the crap out of him. Beige operates on a system of calculated recklessness, and I love it. Also, he has one of the best and most loyal crews out of the whole worst generation. Most of our worst generation captains have crews that I would describe as Christmas decorations, because they're only seasonal and you only see them on special occasions. But for most of the time, it's just the captain. Not the fire tank pirates though. Capone and his crew are inseparable. They are family, and I love it. Capone Gang Beige is the perfect combination of ambition, intelligence, relative youth, and general dickery that, as a worst generation member, propels him straight into the A tier. Remembering that this is not a power scaling tier list. I don't know if I mentioned that. It's not. Don't think it is. What we're trying to do here is figure out who is the best at being the worst. Because there's the worst, and then there's, the worst. Well, next up is Basil Hawkins, so definitely the latter, because Hawkins is quite possibly the single most disappointing member of the worst generation in the entire 2-year history of their institution. The issue I have with Hawkins is his almost complete lack of ambition. I mean, if anything, the Cards are the captain of this crew, not Hawkins. Because he doesn't do anything until the Cards give him permission. He just waits there like a good boy. A very good boy, but a very bad worst generation. Which, speaking of Cards, Hawkins is one of the few characters in One Piece who appears to have straight up magical powers, because his devil fruit only allows him to conjure and manipulate straw. The tarot card aspect is an entirely separate and criminally underexplored feature. But what I think is really telling is that Hawkins is the only worst generation member who did not ultimately betray Kaido, which again either shows his complete lack of ambition or I guess reluctance of ambition. I'm certain that Hawkins would be a fantastic character in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because that's a series that focuses more on the cards than the characters. However, this is One Piece, and somehow even being associated directly with the word worst does not prepare one for the sheer disappointment that is Basil Hawkins. So it's a good thing that one of his hobbies is taking baths, because he's all washed up right now, and I think it's only appropriate that we open up the Simon tier to truly contemplate our disappointment. But as a palate cleanser, here is Trafalgar Law, who in stark contrast to Hawkins is a shocking overachiever, somehow managing to become both a 3 billion berry pirate and a doctor. If his parents were alive, I'm sure they'd be proud. In terms of being a bad pirate man, there was that one time where he harvested the hearts of 100 human beings and dumped them on the world government's doorstep, which would go down in history as the world's worst Valentine's Day gift. He is of course one of 3 worst generation captains who fought against Kaido, and in fact, come to think of it, it was Law's entire idea to bring Kaido down in the first place. Clever flamingo-based ruse or no, Law is the figure who put the plan to topple Kaido into action when forming that alliance with Luffy on Punk Hazard, and as such can be held directly responsible for the dragon's downfall, and even more directly responsible for the fall down into the hole of Big Mom, plus the overpowered fruit, the overly cute polar bear, and the fact that Law always dresses amazingly, except for that one time in a weird special called Straw Hat Pirates vs. Marines vs. 7 Warlords Holographic Battle Theater, god that's a little long name, where Law was dressed in this abomination. Plus the fact that he's a D adds like this whole new layer of worstedness, because his very existence makes him one of the world's greatest enemies. All of which is to say that Law is a clear S tier. Also hailing from Law's home of North Blue is Diaz Drake, who is also known as Diaz Fake for being an imposter member of the Worst Generation. Drake is a filthy, filthy marine sent to infiltrate the upper circles of high society piracy, but I still consider him a member of the Worst Generation in spirit, because as part of Sword, he is rebelling against his own established system, and his goals aren't too dissimilar from the rest of this gaggle, generally involving bringing down the emperors and such like that. And also in his defense, his epithet is Red Flag Diaz Drake, so no matter who his employers are, be it the Marines or the Beast Pirates, they really should have seen his betrayal from the very beginning. Now a lot of people get confused when it comes to Drake, specifically with the name because it isn't pronounced as an X. The X here is actually the Roman numeral for the number 10, and just as I'm certain the ancient Romans did, that numeral is pronounced as the Spanish word for 10 dias. A lot of this makes sense when you realize that Drake is from North Blue, aka the Old Money Sea, so of course they have all sorts of obnoxious and weird wanky ways to pronounce their stupid wealthy names. I imagine Drake going for his job interview at the Marines and the interviewer going, "Ah, Mr. X Drake, is it? It's pronounced Diaz Drake, you uncultured swine." You know what? That's fair. I do quite literally have the word pig in my name. But then all of his trademark attacks are X puns like Excalibur. So look, he's a very fickle yet wealthy Allosaurus. So Drake loses a point for being fake, he then gains a point for being real in spirit, loses a point for the wanky name, but gains a point for being a dinosaur, leaving us with a net 0 and a very middling B tier. And now I suspect that someone has left a half-eaten cherry pie on the floor because we have attracted a Blackbeard infestation. To be clear, the entire reason why the Worst Generation even exists is because of Blackbeard. He was an uninvited guest who complained and moaned and whinged until he got to be part of the group. Originally, these pirates were known as the 11 Supernova, but Blackbeard saw that and got hit with a severe case of FOMO, barged his way into the group and said, "How do you do, fellow kids?" And thus the name had to be changed to the Worst Generation because you can't be the 11 Supernovas with 12. It just doesn't work. And Blackbeard, this guy, man, he just has to be involved in everything. Oh, can I be a supernova? Can I be a warlord? Can I be an emperor? And now he's all like, can I be the pirate king? It never ends. And it's not even fair because Blackbeard is so far above most members of the Worst Generation that even S tier isn't good enough for him. Much like the hippopotamus that he is quite literally based on, he just takes up far too much space. However, this is for good reason, because Blackbeard is a true force to be reckoned with. He has the balls to fight when he needs to, and much like a real life hippo, he can retract said balls if he needs to run away. Blackbeard is just so much further along in his pirate career, with a suite of negative personality traits that would truly crown him the worst in any definition of the word. But to be fair to everyone else, we're gonna plonk him over here in the satellite FOMO tier. But for the record, the FOMO tier would rank above the S tier. Jewelry Bonnie is next, and she actually has a lot in common with our protagonist Monkey D. Luffy. Both are notorious gluttons, children of world-renowned criminals, and both have worn incredibly short shorts. But when it really comes down to it though, Bonnie is less of a Luffy and more of a Vivi, because she is just really bad at being a pirate. Constantly on the run or being captured with no crew to even captain anymore, things aren't looking great for Bonnie on this list. The one thing she does have going for her is that Bonnie is the only member of the Worst Generation to have had a custom wedding dress made for her through a collaboration with Placole or Placole, I don't know how to pronounce it. But I don't think the Bonnie dress looks too bad actually. I'm sure that Kuma would proudly rappel his daughter down the aisle wearing that. Although with that said, imagine having Kuma as your father-in-law. Honey, this is my dad. Tyrant revolutionary cyborg Bartholomew Kuma. Good luck. Back to business though, I think that Bonnie is an incredibly rich character, full of depth, substance, and impossible quantities of pizza. As a Worst Generation member, she is passable, but below average, which we all know is the universal meaning of a C. Massacre Soldier Killer is now pretty eager for a bit of the old ranking, and I would say that he certainly has the most intimidating name of all of the Worst Generation members. I always love characters who are named after their professions, like a cigar addict named Smoker, or a complete circus of crap named Clown. But Killer, in terms of raw characteristics, characterization, I think is much more narratively stronger than his captain and takes on the role of the Zoro to Kid's Luffy. And also, he did us all a favor by beating Basil Hawken, so that is always going to result in additional points. The funny thing is, Oda picked Killer's name due to, quote, sheer laziness, and so counter to most characters it holds little to no meaning. But hey, we need to move quickly, because I'm sure that Killer and Shaka are due to found Daft Punk any second now, so Killer is going to be granted a very solid A tier. But now for probably the most controversial member. Scratchman Apu, according to every poll I've ever made, is empirically the most disliked individual within the worst generation. I've genuinely met people who hate Apu with a passion generally reserved for the likes of Treble. And I kind of get it. I mean, he's a prick. He'll betray anyone and everyone just to get a little bit further in this world. However, that makes him an exemplary worst generation pirate. Like Capone, he lacks a bit of raw power, but Apu makes up for that with other skills, which I would describe as being a less personable Jack Sparrow, with the ability to turn his man parts into various brass instruments. Also outside of piracy, Scratchman Apu has his fingers in many pies, thus ruining the literal pies. But in a more metaphorical sense, Apu has all sorts of side gigs from DJing to photojournalism. He is a man who grabs every opportunity mercilessly by the teat and milks it for every last drop. Apu is horrendous, opportunistic, untrustworthy, weird looking, and just generally awful in every way. Which is exactly why he is going to be rewarded with an A tier, because he is one of the absolute best at being the absolute worst. But for arguably the best, here is our classic Monkey D. Luffy. So listing all of Luffy's achievements to become the best of the worst, it would take an entire video. But some notable highlights are smacking a dragon into a volcano, blowing up an old lady's castle, that one time he told an old man to get effed, and harshly juggling a clown's balls with his foot by kicking them. And I trust that you've all either read or watched One Piece enough that I don't have to waste time justifying this, but Luffy is going to occupy his own special Sun God tier. More controversy now though, because next up is Eustace Kid, a theoretical S tier, having brought down Big Mom, fought against Kaido, and did something against Shanks, probably flail helplessly. But Kid is just such a... he's a fan base not favorite. That doesn't matter though, because just like Scratchman Apu, we are going to judge Kid more than fairly. And when it comes down to it, the dude is worth 3 billion berries and will be remembered as one of history's greatest pirates. Yes, his character is narratively bare, as if we walked in on his story changing in the bathroom, but he was the most feared pre-time skip, he has Conqueror's Haki, he captains another worst generation member, and despite the fact that he literally has the word ass in his name, there is only one appropriate way to rank him as a worst generation member, which is the S tier. And now for the most unknown of the worst, it is Mad Monk Rouge, who has by far the lowest bounty of all of them, only 108 million berries, although that has yet to be updated post time skip. In theory, Rouge could be amazing. I mean, he did beat Charlotte Snack, but other than that, the best natural disaster that Rouge can be described as is a drought of knowledge about him and the things it is that he does. And given that he is still an almost completely blank slate to us, I fear there is no choice but to put him in the coin flip of maybe greatness, but maybe not. That is the B tier. And that is every member of the worst generation ranked arbitrarily by a man on the internet.